Nate Diaz has once famously said, "Everybody is on steroids." What if I tell you that our favorite scholar Nathaniel is right all along? A review with today as a cutoff identified 33 current UFC roster members had tested positive for a prohibited substance. And I'm here to provide you a brief breakdown for all 33 cases separated by categories of the performance-enhancing drugs. Note that the number 33 only includes fighters that are currently active in the UFC. There are far more than that if we are speaking historically. So, the first group of PEDs we are going to start with are anabolic steroids and testosterone-related agents. And the first fighter we are going to discuss actually competed pretty recently at UFC Abu Dhabi, and that's none other than Rizvan Kuniev. So Rizvan Kuniev tested positive, and it occurred during the 2023 PFL season for the very first time. And the substances he tested positive for are drostanolone, methanolone, and boldenone, and 19-norandrostrone. He was tested positive for 4 different anabolic steroids by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, which resulted in a commission suspension after a failed PFL test. The substances he had tested positive for have strong potential performance-enhancing relevance when it comes to building strength, muscle retention, and recovery relevance. The guy was practically a science experiment back then, and a lot of people are noting the physique change after he joined the UFC. Well, the second fighter we have on this list is Muhammad Usman. I've already broken down Muhammad Usman's steroid usage in my previous video actually about Kamaru Usman. If you have not seen it, please make sure to check it out. I'm not going to go into details about him here, but he was tested positive for anabolic steroids and admitted to using a research compound as well. Again, if you want to know the details, go check out the video I did on Kamaru Usman. Well, the next blob we're going to discuss here is Hamdi Abdel Wahab. Guys, this is fun. I feel like I'm doing a car prediction, breaking down and listing all these fighters, but it's not about their skills, it's about their drug use. So basically, this big body here had an earlier methanolone case and a second violation involving exogenous testosterone values. So he was first tested positive in a 2022 sample, resulting in a 2-year ban, and tested positive again in April and May of 2024 samples, resulted in 6 months of suspension. Like what everybody said, you cannot judge a book by its cover, because if you look at him, you will not assume that this guy is on PEDs. But anyways, the next fighter we're going to talk about is Bruno Silva. And interestingly enough, his record is also not a single isolated finding. He was tested positive for boldenone in an earlier case in 2019, which resulted in a 2-year sanction, and CSAD later imposed 6 months after detecting a low level of drostanolone metabolite. The last anabolic individual we have here is Yasmin Lucindo, with her suspension ended in June 24 of 2026. Yasmin Lucindo tested positive for mastranolone, but CSAD's investigation did not establish intentional use and could not exclude a contamination from a compounding pharmacy. So just a brief explanation here. Mastranolone is usually used to treat male with low testosterone levels, like me. I'm just kidding. But anyways, I'm not pointing fingers. Just wanted to put that out there as I believe this is pretty suspicious. It makes very little sense that she would be prescribed such a compound as a quote-unquote treatment. But anyways, we're going to move on from anabolic steroids and we're going to discuss SARMs. The first fighter we're going to talk about here is Sugar Sean O'Malley. I'm sure most of you guys knew that Sean O'Malley was tested positive for ostrine, which is the same substance that Ryan Garcia got tested positive for against Devin Haney, which resulted in their fight becoming a no contest. But I think most people are unaware of how O'Malley actually had separate ostrine findings in both 2018 and 2019, which resulted in separate 6-month sanction, which I believe is very suspicious, especially how quickly it was brushed under the rug. Could be UFC's doing, but I'm not pointing any fingers. Basically, ostarine is a SARM marketed for anabolic effects and prohibited as an anabolic agent as it could promote muscle preservation and recovery, which benefits a competing fighter in many ways when it comes down to training and especially weight cutting. Marvin Vittori was also part of the same group of contamination-linked ostarine cases. Vittori also tested positive for trace ostarine and accepted 6 months in 2018, while USADA concluded the pattern was consistent with a contaminated supplement. He still received a penalty for a 6-month period of ineligibility. The next person we're going to discuss here is Tim Means, and his case went actually one step further. So basically, essentially, spiritually, Tim Means actually did not test positive for ostarine, but a sealed version of a supplement contained the undeclared drug, suspicious to say the least. This positive test forced the UFC to pull Tim Means from his scheduled main event fight against Donald Cerrone and resulted in a 6-month suspension. The next person we're going to discuss on the list is Amanda Ribas. Amanda Ribas' original punishment was ultimately terminated after a similar contamination investigation. And while Ribas kind of got off easily, Daniel Rodriguez's sample contained not one, but 2 different SARMs, yet his case also somehow ended with a contamination-based reduction. Daniel Rodriguez tested positive for ostarine and ligandrol, but product testing established contamination, and USADA said the detected levels would not have benefited performance, which is a strange indicator since most people who uses PEDs cycle on and off anyways, therefore should expect various levels when tested. But oh well. The next fighter we're going to discuss here is Sean O'Malley's zesty teammate, Kyler Phillips, who also had an ostarine positive. Notice a pattern here? But publicly available case summary offers less explanatory detail. The Nevada state suspended Kyler Phillips after an out-of-competition ostarine positive, and the official outcome establishes the violation, but the supplied records does not establish intentional use, according to the Nevada State Athletic Commission. The last person on this list is Grant Dawson, who we're going to discuss later. Right now, we can't get into details here since there are not much existing information on it. Basically, his steroid metabolite finding was analytically real, but legally dismissed without further explanation. Now we're finished with the SARMs goblins. The next PEDs of choice we're going to discuss is EPO, peptide hormones, and growth hormone secretagogues. Recently, Volkan Ozdemir admitted administering EPO supplied by a pharmacist. Cooperation reduced punishment, and I'm sure most of you already know what EPO does, but I'm going to have a quick breakdown anyways. So essentially, EPO stimulates red blood cell production and can improve oxygen carrying capacity, which obviously improves your cardio, which is essential to mixed martial arts. Ozdemir admitted to using EPO and said that he was unaware of the substances recommended by the pharmacist and actively came clean. But the next person here, not so much. Bassel Hafez's peptide case involved a wellness clinic and a disputed product description. The substance he used was apamorelin. He was tested positive in 2026 by CSAD and received a 12-month suspension, which he said that a wellness clinic product did not disclose apamorelin, which CSAD found gross negligence. Basically, what he took was a growth hormone, and it could stimulate GH signaling. CSAD did not need to prove a bodybuilding style intent. It found that he was grossly negligent in using an inadequately checked wellness clinic product. A lot of people have also noted that the physique change of Hafez while in between fights. For example, when he was fighting JDM, he looks absolutely roided out, vascular, veiny, dry, and pulsating. While compared to him fighting Oban Elliott, he looked like a deflated version of himself. While Hafez got caught, Raquel Pennington got dominated. Her peptide-related case began very differently as she reported the substance herself. In 2020, Pennington voluntarily disclosed medically supplied prohibited substances before USADA collected the positive sample. A level of cooperation reflected in a 6-month sanction, and the substances are 7-keto-DHEA, which is classified anabolic agent, and AOD 9064, which is a peptide hormone-related substance that's used for fat loss and recovery benefits. It is assumed that the consumption was unintentional, as Pennington quickly self-reported and accepted the suspension without hesitation. The next banned substance we're going to talk about here are hormone and metabolic modulators. And the first fighter we're going to discuss was Ramazan Temirov. In his 2025 samples, he got tested positive for trimetazidine, resulted in a 1-year sanction. 2 samples treated as 1 violation. Basically, trimetazidine is a metabolic modulator that may affect how cells use energy under low oxygen conditions, which obviously could be extremely beneficial in combat. And Marina Moroz is a different case. Marina Moroz's meldonium case involved almost the same anti-doping lesson. Meldonium is the same substance that Izam Makhachev got tested positive for years ago, and we'll go through that later as well. And it is prohibited as it is a metabolic modulator with the potential effects on energy metabolism. Now we're getting to the juice. Get it? Izam Makhachev also produced a meldonium finding, but the timing changed the outcome completely. In 2016, meldonium was detected in Makhachev's sample, but authorities accepted that he had used it medically before the ban. Very convenient. His provisional suspension was therefore lifted, but some may notice a pattern where a lot of athletes from Dagestan, especially Team Khabib, had dealt with issues with substances in the past. Izam had previously mentioned how his coaches had him taking vitamins ever since he was a kid, which many interpreted as performance-enhancing drugs. Bobby Green had famously accused him for it as well, but most people just brush it off as Bobby Green being a sore loser. But I personally do not think that is the case. And now, since we're talking about Team Khabib, we have to bring up cousin Umar Nurmagomedov's tamoxifen case, which also ended without a sanction. See a pattern here? But the documentation is weaker than Makhachev's case. So basically, tamoxifen manipulates estrogen signaling and can be used in hormone recovery contexts, especially after uses of other PEDs that change one's testosterone levels, as oftentimes the use of PEDs would lead to a stunt of natural production of testosterone, and that's where tamoxifen comes into play. A tamoxifen metabolite was reportedly detected in cousin Umar's system, but the case was cleared because the primary decision is difficult to verify in English, and Umar was able to get away with it without further investigation. While Umar escaped most of the consequences, other hormone modulator cases did produce formal sanctions. For example, Michal Olejniczak's tested positive for clomiphene, which alters estrogen feedback and that can increase testosterone signaling. He accepted a 1-year sanction and had his UFC 219 win overturned. And while we're talking about one substance, what's better than one? It is 2. Roman Dolidze's case combined clomiphene with a turinabol metabolite. Before his UFC debut, Roman Dolidze tested positive for clomiphene and turinabol metabolite, which has hormone manipulation plus anabolic effects. While already under the UFC testing program, which he was suspended by USADA for a year, Grant Dawson also had a turinabol metabolite finding, but USADA dismissed the case. Dawson's sample contained a prohibited steroid metabolite, but USADA dismissed the case because the exposure predated his testing obligations. Hormone modulators can also appear alongside anabolic agents, as Elvin Hines' onboarding case. Elvin Hines' sample detected anabolic agents and a tamoxifen metabolite, while CSAD concluded the case occurred before signing as well as Grant Dawson, but still punished his failure to disclose it when he entered the program. Just look at his pudding of a man. Who would have thought that he was on PEDs? The next person we're going to discuss here is Marcos Rodrigo de Lima, and his anastrozole case centered on a prescription and failure to check. Anastrozole is a aromatase inhibitor that changes estrogen and testosterone balance, while de Lima's prescription explained why anastrozole was present, but not why he bypassed the anti-doping approval process. Now, we're done with hormone and metabolic modulators. We're moving on to the next category. And this category contains drugs that may not build muscle at all, but can affect weight cutting or concealment. And they are diuretics and masking agents. So Diuretics, let me know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, admitted not only to taking diuretics to make weight, resulting in 12-month suspension and his win changed to no contest. This substance promotes fluid loss and can dilute urine or facilitate rapid weight reduction. CSAD declined to reduce the sanction even though he self-admitted because the use produced a direct weight-cutting advantage that obviously benefited him in competition. Next, Caroline Foro's furosemide positive also affected his scheduled fight, but the supplement testing changed the context. Furosemide promotes rapid fluid loss and possible urine dilution as well, which benefits weight cutting dramatically. Caroline Foro's sample was positive, but investigators also found furosemide in a sealed supplement, making this a substantiated contamination case. On top of that, Douglas Silva de Andrade was also tested positive for furosemide and received 6 months. The official record preserved the positive while discussing a supplement source, while Douglas Silva de Andrade received 6 months. Melissa Gatto's earlier furosemide case produced a longer sanction. The positive test produced a 1-year sanction compared to the others, but the supplied official summary does not justify calling it proven intentional masking, and the reason why she received a longer sentence is unclear. On the other hand, Erin Blanchfield's spironolactone case was treated much more leniently. Spironolactone is another diuretic/masking agent that can change fluid balance. Blanchfield only received a public warning for prescribed spironolactone, and this was a prohibited medication case, not evidence of an anabolic steroid program. And now we're done with weight-cutting related substances. The final distinct category involves stimulants and legitimate medication. The first fighter in this category we're going to discuss is Miles Jones. Miles Jones' case involved prescribed Adderall, not an anabolic drug. Nevada imposed a suspension while USADA accepted that the medical evidence and issued public warning instead. He may be the only person on the list that does not have any flag for his usage. I personally find that Adderall being prohibited is quite ridiculous, but that closes the distinct stimulant group. But several fighters belong more than one category. And lastly, we're going to talk about is just additional mixed or complicated cases. This first fighter we're going to discuss in this category is Khalil Rountree Jr. Rountree referred for himself for DHEA, which was a hormone precursor classified as an anabolic agent. The performance values of the specific exposures was not established. CSAD imposed a reduced 2-month sanction, and similar to Rountree, Azamat Murzakanov's later Ligandrol case also received a reduced punishment after sealed product testing. And then next up, King Green also had a DHEA case, and it came from an over-the-counter supplement, but strict liability rules still produced a 6-month sanction, which was a very interesting choice. Diego Ferreira's case contained SARM with a DHEA-related compound and received one of the longer sanctions among the older active roster cases after testing positive for ostrine and 7-keto DHEA simultaneously. So overall, as I would like to tarnish other people's names, this list cannot be reduced to simply 33 cheaters, since some evidence falls along a spectrum of omitted administration, contamination, or negligence with clinics or prescription products, while some are definitely more suspicious than others. It is certainly very difficult to draw definitive conclusions. Well, that being said, I am more of a believer that athletes are prone and inclined to use performance-enhancing drugs in general, especially when it comes to a sport like mixed martial arts, where a person's brain health and life is essentially on the line, and they should be seeking out every advantage possible. It also does not help that most fighters who gets caught often suffer very little consequences, as mentioned previously. Again, like what Nate Diaz famously said, everyone is on steroids. If you guys liked the video, please like and subscribe, comment your thoughts and prayers, and peace.